Coach, this year, round 8, 2017, we saw the Power go to China and have a magnificent game against the Gold Coast. It was spectacular. Andy Hunter played an enormous part in making that happen, along with the whole footy club. I don't want to embarrass Andy. He's now the General Manager of China Engagement. He joins us. Andy, thanks for your time.
G'day guys, how are you?
Good, Andy.
Mate, have you finally had a chance? I mean, it's a couple of months ago now that it all happened, and there was a big swirl leading into it, and even the decision about who's going to wear what jumper. But now it's blown away, and then round 8 next year it all happens again. How's it feel?
Yeah, you don't really reflect on it that much. I mean, very soon after, I took 2 weeks off and went overseas with the wife. And as soon as we got back, we were thinking about how can we do things better next year? How can we improve on what we've done? How can we build on this initial success? So I guess it's a little bit like a sporting career in a sense. I mean, when did you start reflecting on what you achieved in sport? Well, it's probably after you finished, because whilst you're in it, you're still trying to improve and trying to move on to the next milestone.
So Andy, how can you improve it for next year? Because it was a great success, but how can you improve it for next year? And what ideas do you have in mind?
Well, there are some elements that I think will be different next year. What we're seeing is that after the first year's success, both governments are seeing that this is a real opportunity for the bilateral relationship. So we've got this beautiful thing, which is sport, that Australians love. Chinese are learning to love sport more and are getting more engaged in sport. So how can we use this to improve the Australia-China relationship? So both governments, I think, will be involved in next year's game, and that will add a completely different element and a different allure to that which we had this year. It'll be a bigger crowd, I think, so the capacity of the ground will be increased because the demand was so big last year and we sold out too quickly. So it'll be a bigger crowd, and I think it'll be something really significant for the two countries.
What size crowd was it this year?
It was 11,000, and thereabouts.
Next year
will be 14,000.
14,000.
I'm confident we'll sell that out pretty quickly.
When you talk about 11,000, 5,000 people went from Australia to watch the game. So just on a side thing, you go, the tourism side of it for China, they're going, we can cash in here as well. So it opened up a whole range of other doors. The viewing audience, 5 million last time. It's going to be more next time. We set
an
AFL record for viewing audience?
I think we will, So there are more stations now that are interested. Last year the 5 million came from essentially 3 stations in China. This year the AFL is talking to different television stations, so I think there'll be more avenues through which the game can be viewed over there. So I think, last year, for example, you said 6,000 Australians came across. That meant that we didn't have time to market it to the local audience. So there were 3,000 Chinese there, but this year we really want to spend some time ensuring that it's about 50-50 and that the Chinese people have an opportunity to view our wonderful sport.
Leading up to the game, Andy, what was the feeling like from the Chinese people that the game was coming there? What was their reaction to it all? Something new for them? Yeah,
I think so. Look, it didn't touch everyone. It's a massive country, 1.4 billion people. In Shanghai alone, there's 115 international sporting events every year. So we're one of many, but the people that did come into contact with it, I think were highly engaged. I think they thought the sport was exciting. It was a thrilling event, a thrilling spectacle. So more importantly, I think those who came away having seen the game, they wanted to be involved, and they certainly, I think it opened people's eyes to what could be possible in the future for footy in China.
Fantastic. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because the doors are starting to open up all around the world. And you and I having a discussion before, is India next, is the Philippines next? The game will become global, and Port Adelaide have now started that. So in 40 years' time, we won't be here, but it'd be nice to look back and go, I played a pretty big part in it, getting to that stage. So are you excited that the club and yourself have really opened up the door now, the international gateway? Yeah, look,
it's an enormous privilege to work for Port Adelaide Footy Club. I think it was an enormous privilege to work at this moment. We've got leaders like Keith Thomas who have a really innovative view to the world and to what a football club can achieve in the community locally, but also internationally. So to be involved in this moment is a great privilege, and I think that it is the start of the internationalisation of our sport that is really a long time coming. I mean, we were just talking off air, why isn't such a great sport viewed by more people around the world? Well, now we've started something, and where it finishes, I think no one knows at this point.
We're not used to in Aussie rules footy the international travel, because this is the first time it's happened. Your wife's an ex-Olympian, so she's used to international travel all the time. Were there times when you're sitting with her and you're talking about it, she's going, what are you talking about? Doesn't that just happen naturally?
Yeah, a few times. I think this is the product of the sport only being played in one country. There are a few times over the last few years since I've been involved with Port Adelaide where I'd get home and, for example, when we were talking about the WADA decision, I mean, as someone involved in Olympic sport, Sally was like, well, yeah, of course. Of course. You can't just blame your coach or the system. The athlete has to take responsibility. For an international athlete, that's completely normal. Similarly, when people are talking about travelling, I mean, for international athletes, this is all quite normal and you cope with it. And the AFL players were in pretty good conditions, context, to be able to compete one week later. So I think that's all part and parcel of the sport having experienced an international context. And I think the learnings and the experiences from that will be quite quick. And
Andy, will Port Adelaide hold the China game for as long as they want it? I read the other day where there's some feeling that the AFL might want them to share it. I find that strange.
Yeah, look, I think for the foreseeable future, we're still the ones who are breaking new ground.
Correct.
And I think
it's your baby.
I think personally, the AFL is quite happy for us to explore this territory, and we want others to come along with us. I don't think in 15 years' time it'll be a success for Port Adelaide to still be the only team interested in China. It'll be a success if the other clubs have looked at what we've done and thought, this is fantastic, this is an opportunity for us, and we want to follow Port Adelaide. And I think that's the nature of progress. I think in 15 years' time, if Port Adelaide's the only AFL club interested in China, then it would be a sad thing.
You would hope it would be, hypothetically, Port Adelaide in Shanghai and say the Crows in Beijing or whoever it may be. But I think it's fair if they ask you to give up the game that they give up the Anzac Day game, because they always hold on to, well, they did that first, so they've got to hold on to it. So I think it's a fair negotiation.
Yeah, true. I think, as a South Australian, a proudly South Australian club, this is something where a South Australian club has been able to do something...
Took the initiative,
historic
Andy.
And extraordinary. And from that reason, I think alone, we should keep demanding that a South Australian club, that Port Adelaide Football Club, is involved in perpetuity in this game.
Exactly.
Is it always going to be the Gold Coast? Could you see it becoming someone else? I know it's Gold Coast next year, but in a couple of years' time, could we play Essendon or Collingwood or...
Yeah, look, we're really excited about playing the Gold Coast again next year because they were part of that first historic moment, and I think it's something that we can share, which was good. It was handy, So we'd like to do that again. But I think in the future, it would be good for the game to have a Victorian team involved. I think Port Adelaide Football Club would embrace that if that was to happen in the future. And I think there are some Melbourne-based teams that have a strategy to engage in China, at least in the local Chinese community, that are very interested in what we're doing. So I can see us playing potentially other teams in the future.
And the game's going to be played on Adelaide Arena, which has got a nice little touch to it.
Yeah, I think so. Look, and again, as a proud South Australian,
my word,
that is it's a good feeling to know that we're also, it's a great thing for our club, it's a great thing for our sport. We'll be involved in an important moment for the Australia-China relationship, but for it to be called Adelaide Arena, for 7 million Chinese to be watching that and to have an awareness of Adelaide and all the beautiful things that we have to offer here, I think it's another exceptional.
It's an amazing situation. Honestly, growing up, I never ever thought for one moment that Port Adelaide, who I didn't like very much, would play a game of football for points in the place China.
Well, it's good to see you using the past tense. You love them now, though.
The only thing that's changed, Dan, is
I'm warming to them, man.
Is that Port Adelaide have travelled. Hey, just quickly for you, you put an enormous amount in, and not that a lot of other people didn't, and I know you don't like to wallow in and talk about yourself much, but when the game finishes, the players are relieved that they've won, the game's over. The coaches do their press conference, and then there's a point where they're relieved it's all over. For you, when was that feeling of, thank goodness it's all over and it's been successful?
Yeah, probably when I was with Sally and we went to Helsinki and St. Petersburg afterwards. We went on holiday, got to reflect on it a little bit, but it's very similar to being an athlete. So I think very few athletes genuinely enjoy the moment. They might embrace the moment. They might find something in the pressure and the responsibility of that moment. But it's only really on reflection afterwards when you've performed well that you can really sit down and think, well, that was fantastic. I think very similarly. I mean, I didn't stop worrying really until after the game was finished, and to see the joy on the faces of the supporters and hear the great feedback. I mean, that was the special moment for me. But as it was still happening, that wasn't what I would describe as enjoyable.
Well, round 9, May next year, so you've got at least up until then before you'll be able to enjoy anything again, because it's to be bigger and better. Hey, Andy, really appreciate you coming in.
Well done, Andy. Good to see you, Andy.
Fantastic. Port Adelaide Footy Club into China, huge success. Stay with us, a bit more to come.